Hi, and welcome to In Search of Insight, Nootropics Depot's monthly podcast. I'm your podcast host, Erika, and sitting next to me is our product specialist at Nootropics Depot, Emiel.
Hey everyone.
Today, Emiel and I are going to be telling you about our new electrolyte supplement, InfiniLyte.
Very exciting stuff. You guys have all been waiting for it for a really long time, and it's finally here.
So, in our last new product video, we told you about InfiniLyte and we broke down the ingredients that are in this electrolyte supplement, but in this video we're going to go in depth into why it's important that we take an electrolyte, especially when we're exercising, but also just to manage our minerals, hydration on a daily basis. And we're going to go in depth into the mechanisms within our body and our cells as far as how do electrolytes actually work to keep us more hydrated and to keep our body, our muscles pumping, and our brain working at its tip-top form. And we've both done some research, watched some really helpful YouTube videos in preparation for this podcast, and we'll recommend a couple of videos that you can check out after you finish watching this podcast to go over some of the basics, but we're going to get really intensely detailed in the science of electrolytes and hydration today. So if this is something that you're curious about, if you're a person who goes to the gym all the time, if you're somebody who feels dehydrated often, or if you're just curious to learn a little bit more about this new product, stick around, watch this video, and get ready to learn everything you need to know about electrolytes.
Absolutely. Are you feeling thirsty?
I am. I've been feeling thirsty, really thirsty this whole week. I feel like when fall weather comes in, the humidity drops, it gets a little bit windy, and even if I drink a lot of water, I still feel thirsty more than I do even in the middle of the peak of summer.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Of course, that is our baseline state, so Erika's not necessarily talking about exercise, because exercising in this kind of weather would probably result in slightly less sweat and electrolyte loss than if you would in the summer, and it's hot and humid, you're going to be sweating a lot more, and your sweat contains a certain amount of electrolytes, so that means the more you sweat, the more electrolytes you lose. But we'll get into why that is in a second. Right now, it's probably also because we're just not drinking that much water because it's getting cooler. I've been catching myself doing that, so I have to maybe remind myself to drink a little bit more. On the other hand, our body is quite specialized at telling you when you need to hydrate by thirst, which is a quite tightly regulated system. And we'll get a little bit into how that works too. But for right now, I'm also feeling a bit thirsty. And I was having a headache earlier this morning because I think I didn't drink enough yesterday. So that's definitely where headaches come into play as well, a little bit of dehydration. Electrolytes do seem to help. I drank half of a serving an hour or two ago, and that seemed to really help with the headache. So hydration is important for many different aspects. It's important for exercise, and I think most of this podcast will be focused on exercise because we definitely developed this as a product that takes exercise into mind and takes the losses that you see in exercise of electrolytes into account, and that's and then enhancing recovery, and we'll really get into the details on that soon, but that's what this is calibrated for.
So to give you a little bit of background, Emiel and I have just been going through our daily routine today. We didn't go to the gym, so this electrolyte, not yet, that's true. This electrolyte is going to be keeping us hydrated based on just a normal day's water and hydration loss.
Yes, and to be honest, we don't really need this. We'll again go over a little bit in the normal losses. And do you really need an electrolyte if you're not moving? Probably not. I would personally say if you're a sedentary individual, pick up some InfiniLyte and use it as motivation to actually go sweat, because that's what you need it for. If you're just sitting around all day long, you're not really losing that many electrolytes, you probably don't need something like this. This is really designed for people who are physically active, which in my opinion, everyone should be physically active enough to require an electrolyte every once in a while, because we need to sweat, we need to exercise.
Yeah, if you need more encouragement to get up and get moving, check out our podcast that we did with Mr. Happy Joshua, where we talk about the essence and the importance of exercise in every single one of our body's functions. Our body needs us to exercise in order to work properly. So definitely check that podcast out. It's really interesting, and you're going to get a different perspective in terms of why exercise is so important.
Okay, and I'm going to interrupt you here for a second with some more vigorous shaking. You can see it dissolves quite easily and completely. I had a few clumps earlier, but I was trying to not make as much noise to get in the way of what Erika was saying. But if you give it a good hard shake, it completely dissolves, and it's green, and that's because of the form of copper we used, which is sodium copper chlorophyllene. Again, we'll talk a little bit more about why in a second. But let's drink some of this. Actually, before we do that, when it comes to exercise, we lose about 1 liter of sweat per hour. This is 1 liter. That's a lot of fluid. Like, it seems hard to imagine that you would lose this much. Worse yet, if you're exercising in extreme heat, like we were talking about earlier, and it's really humid or really dry, that can definitely dry you out too. Like in Arizona, you needed to drink way more water than anywhere else I've lived in the world. You're losing 2 liters. So 2 of these full bottles every hour. So let's say you're going on a very strenuous hike. It's still kind of warm around the Phoenix area. For example, we went on a hike one time on Picket Post Mountain, which is in the Superstitions, during a time of year where it was already getting cooler. I think it was October or November.
It was August. It was the
August.
end of August. Yeah.
Maybe not so smart on our part. But we went on a day where it was kind of cool.
We went early in the morning, before the sun was fully up.
Yeah. But super dry, and we lost a lot of fluid. I think we brought a Camelback between the two of us, which had like 2 or 4 liters of water in it, and some more bottles, and we were drinking it the whole time, and we definitely felt dehydrated at the end, and it took us a long time to hydrate. So in a scenario like that, we were hiking for 3, maybe 4 hours, losing potentially up to 2 liters, 2 of these full bottles. And it's even hard to replenish that. So apparently you can replenish about 1 liter of fluid. You can absorb 1 liter of fluid per hour while you're exercising. So this is putting the hydration picture into a big balance, or in a good picture of the hydration. But I think it's fascinating. This is how much you can lose in a solid workout. And the minerals that we dissolved in here are somewhat representative of what you lose in an hour or to 2 hours to 1 to 2 liters of sweat. So that's really how we've calibrated this, which means that if you are a sedentary individual, you don't need this, in my opinion. There are different opinions there. Some of my colleagues have argued with me there. But this contains a good amount of sodium, which you lose through your sweat, and you wouldn't be losing through your sweat if you're not exercising. So if you're just drinking this and not exercising, you're probably going to get a little bit too much sodium into your daily diet if you're taking a full serving. Maybe just putting 1 scoop in your water, that's maybe a very nice way of doing it if you're not exercising. That's actually what I'm going to be doing going forward on rest days, when I'm not in the gym, when I'm not sweating a lot. But enough talking, let's have a taste.
Yes.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Pretty neutral, little salty, little bit of a slightly odd sulfury smell.
Mm-hmm.
This is chock full of lots of different minerals, electrolytes and trace minerals, and even some ketones from some calcium beta-hydroxybutyrate. So this is a very complex formula, and I feel like for the level of complexity, it actually tastes fine. I drink this fairly often now. If I go to the gym, I'm drinking it. After the gym, I'm drinking it. It's always unflavored because that's all we have at the moment, and I'm really liking it. Actually, I think most of us prefer just the unflavored versions because they're easy to drink. And if you dilute them in a larger volume of water, they're quite easy to drink. So in this scenario where if we were going on this hike again on Picket Post Mountain, I would put this in the Camelback and dilute it, and then if you had a flavoring in it, in a Camelback, it would probably be a little bit of a dilute flavor. Maybe you don't want to be tasting the same flavor for 4 or 5 hours on a hike, and you want something more neutral, then this is really good. It feels like something about that saltiness triggers something in my brain and makes me feel better. Especially during workouts, I drink it. It just feels better than plain water going down.
Another benefit of it not being flavored is that there's no sugar in this electrolyte.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not going to be consuming extra sugar, and this is something to consider if you're watching your sugar content, watching your sugar intake.
Or like a lot of you're on a ketogenic diet, you don't want to have any carbohydrates in your diet or limited amount, then this is also good. When we do a flavored version, we will probably do one that has a little bit of dextrose in it, because that can help a little bit with hydration and endurance. So in a sports context, again, that's really good. But we'll also do a flavored one that doesn't have any sugar in it and is just sweetened with something like stevia, because we do want to give that flexibility, because I know there are a lot of people amongst us who are following a ketogenic diet, and they're probably not going to be super stoked on sugar being in their electrolyte. Okay, so now with all of the basics out of the way, it tastes good, it looks green, copper chlorophyllin, it does look a little bit like swamp water. Maybe when you first smell it, maybe you get an idea that you're walking next to an Amsterdam canal. It's honestly not the most pleasant thing in the world, but it's so neutral that it really doesn't get to you. You smell it one time and you basically get desensitized to it, at least for me.
Now that I'm drinking it for fifth, sixth time, the taste doesn't bother me at all, and I find it's actually quite pleasant.
How I like to describe it, it's coconut water with none of the fun. Like,
that's a good way, for sure. Yeah, coconut water minus the tropical vibe.
Yeah.
That's a really good way to describe
There's
it.
no coconut taste, there's no tanginess, there's no sweetness. It's actually, that's not totally true. There is a bit of sweetness just from the minerals, like magnesium is a little bit sweet. So it just tastes like an ultra mineralized water. That's a bit swampy.
For sure. Okay, so now let's get to talking about what are the ingredients in this electrolyte, so that we can then talk about why these ingredients are important to keep us hydrated.
Actually, maybe that's going a little bit too far. We might actually have to just explain hydration first.
Okay.
And then we can, because there are a lot of ingredients in here, and I want it to all make sense if you're not super familiar with hydration. So, obviously, our body is about 60% water. We use water for a lot of different processes. We use it as a transport mechanism. Your blood is mostly water, so all of the nutrients that are dissolved in your blood are dissolved in water. So it's a way in which we can get something from point A to point B. If we want to get, for example, magnesium from our stomach into our brain, it has to go through the blood. So water is a big carrier there. And within this water, within these fluids, we have a certain amount of dissolved solutes, minerals. And these minerals are really important for driving gradients, where now you have water following basically the electrolytes in and out of cells. So you have this fluid, mostly water with a lot of solutes in it, and that those solutes give you a certain level of osmolarity, which is measured in milliosmoles. For the average person, the normal reference range is between 275 and 295 milliosmoles per liter, and you have then extracellular fluid, the fluid, for example, that's traveling in your blood vessels that are around cells, and then you have intracellular fluid, the fluid that's inside of your cells. And again, this is mostly water with solutes in it, and the osmolarity is the same as your extracellular fluid. So again, 275 to 295 milliosmoles per liter. And that is a very important concept to start talking about, because if, for example, the milliosmoles are dropping or staying the same inside of a cell, but then the levels outside of the cell are going up in relation to what's inside of the cell. Because water follows these electrolytes, it's going to try and balance that so that the milliosmoles are matching each other again. So if, for example, we're exercising really heavily and we're losing water, and we're losing water at a higher rate than our electrolytes, then we're going to have a more concentrated electrolyte solution outside of the cells. And that's actually going to pull water from the cell and put it in the extracellular fluid to try and balance things out again. And it does that quite well, and now we have an isotonic. Basically, they're both the same. So when you see that sometimes on bags of saline in a hospital, or even on electrolyte drinks, isotonic, same, you're going to balance that system out. But that's really important, and that is a big part of dehydration as well, because if we are concentrating those electrolytes outside of the cell, and now there's a compensatory mechanism. We're pulling water out of cells, and that's dehydrating the cells. That's bad. You can actually have it the other way around too, because maybe now you're thinking, oh, well, the electrolytes are concentrating within my extracellular fluid, then why would I want to take electrolytes in? Well, if you start pounding water, you're going to dilute the minerals, the solutes in the extracellular fluid, which is now going to do the opposite thing. So now you have inside of the cell, you have a higher concentration, a higher milliosmol amount than outside of the cell. And again, because water follows that gradient, it's going to want to balance that out. So now we get the opposite, where water is flooding into cells and actually expanding those cells. And those cells can expand so much that they even explode. And that's also really bad. So maybe you've heard about water toxicity, and that's a real thing. If you're drinking a lot of water that doesn't have the appropriate amount of minerals in it, you're going to be diluting the intracellular and extracellular fluid, and you're going to have less and less electrolytes there, and eventually that's going to cause water to get pulled into cells, and your cells are going to expand and explode. That's really bad and can actually kill you. So you see this actually in certain endurance athletes, and especially with sodium. They keep drinking water that doesn't replace the sodium that they're losing through their sweat, and then you get something called hyponatremia, when your sodium levels drop. And then, one of the results is maybe that you're pulling excessive amounts of water into your cells. So the whole concept here is that we want to maintain a fluid balance. And electrolytes are important for that. And we lose water quicker than we do lose electrolytes, but we're also losing electrolytes through our sweat. And like I mentioned earlier, losing a liter worth of sweat is quite a lot, and you could lose about 500 milligrams of sodium in this liter of sweat. So it becomes quite easy to see that if you're replenishing that liter of water that you're losing, that fluid that you're losing, with water that doesn't have any electrolytes in it, let's say in the most extreme case, you're drinking reverse osmosis water that hasn't been remineralized. Or you're a real crazy bastard and you're drinking the DI water from our lab. Deionized, it's as pure and clean as possible, has no more minerals in it. This is what we use for a lot of our analytical instruments. They don't want minerals floating around. It messes with a lot of things, so you don't want that. But if you drink that water, it's just going to start pulling minerals out of different tissues, maybe even your teeth. You're going to pee it out. You're going to swallow your cells. You're going to dilute everything, so that's not good. So it's generally a good idea to drink water that has some sort of minerals in it. We're lucky in the Netherlands that we have some of the best drinking water on the planet with decent mineralization, so the water that we're drinking has a good amount of minerals in it. But again, definitely not 500 milligrams of sodium per liter, which if you're losing 500 milligrams of sodium during exercise, you would want to replace that single liter of water that you lost. You want to replace that, but you also want to replace the amount of sodium that was in that water, so that the osmolarity stays the same inside of your cells, outside of your cells, and all of the processes that rely on those electrolytes, and those electrolytes guiding water around, that relies on sodium, so you want to replace both water and sodium. So this is, of course, why we're talking about electrolytes.
The big concept here is that we want to keep our electrolytes and our hydration balanced. And this is something that's a bit of a new concept for me, because I knew basically nothing about the electrolyte process or hydration prior to doing this research for this podcast, but now thinking about the fact that our bodies contain minerals and use minerals for different systems, and that we're made up of water. When we drink water that doesn't contain minerals, this is also going to shift our mineral content in and outside of our cells. But if we drink water that's enriched with an electrolyte, this is going to have more of a balancing effect and keep us in that nice sort of middle zone where we're not losing too much water, but we're also not gaining too much minerals. And this is a totally different concept also for exercise, when you think about how intensely you might be exercising and how much liquid or water and minerals you're losing, just how much you're going to have to replace after the fact. It also makes me think about that experience you might have the day after drinking alcohol or a lot of alcohol, and the fact that alcohol and that liquid is also going to have a pretty strong impact on your mineral and hydration in your body and even carry over to the next day. So that's another possible scenario where you might consider taking an electrolyte.
Yeah, that's maybe the one situation where if you are just sitting at home doing nothing and drinking copious amounts of alcohol, I think you have a bigger problem than an electrolyte imbalance at that point. But if you are doing that, that's maybe the one case where a sedentary person should be drinking this electrolyte, because you do end up losing more electrolytes because of ethanol consumption. And I'll touch on that in a second when we're talking about ADH, or antidiuretic hormone, which alcohol inhibits. So there's a lot to cover here, so I have to organize this in a somewhat logical way in my brain, which is turning out to be quite difficult, because not only are we talking about a lot of ingredients in here, it's a very important process. So we've covered the osmolarity, the balance between, and let's quickly touch on why that is. So all of these electrolytes are ions, and they're charged. They have a certain charge. So, for example, sodium, Na, in solution it's Na+. It has a positive charge. Now, if you look at water, which is H2O, and it's kind of arranged as a boomerang, maybe Erika can show this on screen. You have the oxygen at the top, then a hydrogen, and then a hydrogen here, and those all have different charges, very, very mild charges, but those charges can attract the electrolytes. Sodium, the positive charge of the sodium, can attract certain parts of the water. My chemistry knowledge isn't fantastic, as you can maybe see.
So go check out these videos also, that I will put in the description of our podcast, so that you can get the basics from chemistry experts.
Yes. So I believe the oxygen has the negative charge and the hydrogen have the slight positive charge. Any chemistry nerds out there, please correct me if I'm wrong there. But because of that, for example, the sodium is slightly positive, so it's going to be attracted to the slightly negative oxygen. And because of that, they're going to be pulling each other in and out, and that's how this gradient works. And a good way of demonstrating this, if you like to cook steaks or fish, a good method of cooking it even better is to pre-salt. So you put some salt on your steak. And now let's consider that the steak is the cell, and the outside of the cell is the extracellular space, the extracellular fluid. So what we're doing now is, inside of that steak, there is definitely some sodium. This is coming from a living animal with cells very similar to ours, with similar electrolyte balances. So those cells inside of the steak are going to contain water, and they're going to contain some of these solutes. Now, if we put salt on top of the steak, we are creating a big gradient difference. So now the concentration of sodium ions is much, much higher on the outside of the cell, and it's actually going to pull water out of your steak, slightly dry out the surface of it, and then if you wipe some of that salt off and you bake it, now the Maillard reaction is going to go quicker, so you get a nicer crust. Same with fish. Fish works very similarly, but even if you want to, for example, make a cucumber taste a little bit more intense, put some salt on it. it pulls out some of that salt, rinse it off. Now you have a slightly crunchier, more intense cucumber. Another good example is it's really hard to cook eggplants because they contain a lot of water, and one way in which you can get rid of that water inside of the eggplant is to actually put that eggplant in a very salty brine solution. And you would think that's going to put even more water inside of the eggplant, but it doesn't. It pulls water out because of that gradient difference. So this is very similar to how our body works. So I think that's a pretty good point to now move on.
And specifically, these vegetables or the steak, that represents the cell, and then what's happening outside of it, like let's say the brine, that would represent the extracellular liquid.
Correct. And that process we're talking about is completely passive because the steak, there's not going to be transporters that are active because they require ATP, and unfortunately that animal is now dead.
Yeah.
It's not active anymore.
Or in the case of a vegetable, it wasn't thinking and conscious with blood flow and all of those things to begin with.
But there are active transporter systems in plants, of course.
But not once they've been harvested.
Not once they've been harvested.
Yeah.
Also not totally true, but for convenience sake, let's say all activity ceases. So you have passive diffusion, and water can passively diffuse. However, things that are charged, like these ions, can't just passively diffuse. They usually have to go through transporters or little channels. And in the case of the electrolytes we're talking about, some of the most important ones, sodium, potassium, and calcium, and magnesium is important in this process too, you have the sodium potassium ATPase pump. And most of, or a very large amount of the ATP in our bodies is being utilized for this sodium potassium ATPase pump, because it's very important. You can think of your body kind of as a giant electrical generator. We have a lot of electricity in us, and that's what makes our muscles contract. This is electrical activity, but that electrical activity is being stimulated by these electrolytes because they have different charges. So these electrolytes going in and out of the cells, that's what creates that charge, and that's what drives a lot of physical processes within the body. It's what drives, for example, neurotransmission. When a neuron starts firing, a lot of sodium starts coming in and it gets hyperpolarized. You get a lot of a positive charge, and then the opposite happens. Potassium flows out, calcium flows in. A lot of these fairly complex systems of ions moving in and out of a neuron creates this electrical gradient that then sends signals. So neurotransmission, our whole experience of the world depends on the proper functioning of the sodium potassium ATPase pump. Muscle contractions do too, and hormone release, all of this, all processes really depend on that. But this is also how water can travel in and out, because water follows the electrolytes. So if you're pumping sodium into a cell, you're also pumping water into a cell. And if you're pumping potassium out of a cell, you're also taking water with it. And in the case of the sodium potassium pump, you're pumping in 3 ions of sodium and you're pumping out 2 ions of potassium. So this is basically how it works. But then with that potassium, when the potassium goes out, calcium can go in too. And that changes the electrical gradients. But it's kind of in the name. Electrolyte. They transmit electricity. This is also in, if you have, for example, a good experiment is if you have a container of water that has no minerals in it, and you put electricity in it. For example, you take a lamp, you cut the cord of the lamp. You don't do this, by the way. It's probably really dangerous. If you then plug the lamp cord into the wall, hang it into that distilled water, and then have the other wire where the bulb is actually connected. You hang that in the water. nothing's going to happen. The light bulb is not going to light up because there are no ions in that demineralized water to actually conduct the electrons to put it into the light bulb. But if you were to mix just a scoop of InfiniLyte in there and you stirred it up, that light bulb would go on, because now, and again, this seems crazy dangerous because you just have a wire coming from your wall and just hanging in a bucket of water. Now with electrolytes in it, now you're actually conducting electricity and you're able to put it inside of the lamp. So yes, that's electrolytes carry charge. And this is why they're important within our body, and they power all of the cells. And magnesium plays a really important role in the sodium-potassium ATPase pump, because it also affects how this pump works. It seems to act as a bit of a cofactor there as well. So this is why we need electrolytes. And of course, if we're drinking a lot of water and we're diluting those electrolytes, we're going to have less and less sodium and potassium and calcium to actually power these systems. So this is why electrolytes are important. And if you deplete your electrolytes over time, you're going to feel dizzy, you're going to feel weak, you're going to feel fatigued, because all of these processes that depend on electrolytes and conducting electrical signals throughout your body just aren't going to work ideally anymore. Same with the light bulb example. The more and more you deplete those electrolytes, probably the fainter the light bulb gets until it goes off. And that's the same with us. We're going to get fainter and then we're just going to die.
This might explain why when I drink a lot of water on a day where I feel really thirsty, but just normal tap water and not an electrolyte, sometimes I can feel even more thirsty, because I'm actually diluting my minerals and electrolytes with that water rather than actually fully hydrating myself.
That could very well be. So yeah, this what Erika just said, the thirst system, that's also quite interesting, because with these solutes moving around, there are also sensors inside of our brain that control our thirst level, how much we urinate, how much we retain water. So if you look at the hypothalamus can take in some of that fluid that's just circulating. And if that fluid has very high solute levels, it's going to pull water out of the cells in the hypothalamus, and it's going to cause these receptors, these stretch-sensitive receptors, it's going to cause them to shrink. And when they shrink, that's a signal for the hypothalamus to send to the pituitary gland right underneath it, and they make a bridge. And you've probably heard us talk about the HPA axis, which is the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland, that bridge between them. It also is very important for stress, but it's also important for hydration, fluid balance, and it can basically screen us and go, oh, those stretch receptors are shrinking. Now, that probably indicates we are getting to a point of dehydration. We need to start holding on to liquid so we can dilute it again and get it to that 275 to 295 milliosmoles per liter. So a way of doing this is for the pituitary gland now to release anti-diuretic hormone. And as the name would suggest, this is going to signal your kidneys to not excrete water and to recycle it. So your kidneys can actually filter all the bad stuff out of the fluid, out of your blood. This is what the kidneys are doing. They're a purifier system. And usually a lot of that water ends up in your bladder and you pee it out. You pee out about 1.5 liters of water every day. If you're getting dehydrated, that sensor system in the hypothalamus and the pituitary then tells your kidneys, hey, we are still going to filter, but instead of dumping that excess water in the bladder, we're just going to put it back into the body. And this then helps with the fluid balance. And what results in that is very concentrated urine. So if you have been dehydrated, a good way of telling if you're dehydrated is the color of your urine. The darker it gets, the more concentrated it is in those solutes, whether that is urea, proteins, B vitamins, minerals. All of that gets concentrated because we have less water to actually dilute it. So then when you pee, it looks dark. if, like Erika was saying, you're just pounding water, the opposite thing is going to happen. Now, those in the hypothalamus, that fluid coming into it that it's sensing is going to have very low solute levels. It's going to have a milliosmol level below 275. And the response to this is to stop making antidiuretic hormone. And when you stop making antidiuretic hormone, now you start peeing, because now you have a diuretic effect. And this is where ethanol comes into play, because ethanol puts a wrench into that process and it blocks the production of antidiuretic hormone, which has the result that alcohol makes you pee more. So if you're taking just tequila shot after tequila shot after tequila shot after tequila shot, it's actually not a whole lot of liquid, but it's causing a diuretic effect. So you're just constantly peeing out electrolytes, B vitamins, all of the important stuff. And this is why, especially, it's not as bad if you're drinking like a 4% ABV beer or something like that. You're consuming quite a lot of fluid and actually some electrolytes. Beer contains some electrolytes. But if you're drinking hard liquor and no water in between, just straight hard liquor the whole time, you're really going to dehydrate yourself.
But is this the reason why people shake salt on their hands before they're taking tequila shots? I don't know.
Maybe, but then all you're getting is sodium and chloride. Two very important ones, but you need some other stuff. But I think what all of this indicates, and especially the more grim reality that I was displaying earlier, that if you start diluting these electrolytes so much, you can actually die. And this is, of course, where the first electrolyte drinks came from. So this is not something we've been doing for hundreds of years. Knowingly, there was a point in time where it became really important to do this, and that is when there was in third world countries conflicts, and with those conflicts came infections that caused diarrhea. So you had widespread diarrhea, and normally through your stool you're only losing about 100 milliliters of water a day, really not a whole lot. But if you have diarrhea, what happens is you pull a lot more water into your intestines, and then you end up losing enormous amounts of water and electrolytes through your stool, through that diarrhea, which puts you in a position that if you're just drinking water, you're going to dilute those electrolytes in your body a lot, and that's going to put you in a very dangerous position. Which is why the WHO made the ORS, the oral rehydration solution, or salt. I'm actually blanking on that right now. I think it's solution. As a very basic, cheap, stable way of providing those essential electrolytes in the case where you're having diarrhea, or in a case where you're losing a lot of electrolytes and you need to replace them simply for saving your life. And a lot of electrolytes on the market are based on that WHO ORS formulation, but that doesn't 100% make sense, because we are not looking at necessarily saving people's lives. I would hope you go to a hospital if you're so severely dehydrated, and don't reach for this stuff. Go to a hospital. They give you IV electrolytes, even better. But in third world countries where that's not always possible and you need to quickly save someone's life, you need to give them a cheap oral rehydration solution, which the WHO standardized, and I think that's been an incredible thing for humanity. It's saved a lot of lives. Maybe not the best to base an electrolyte off of for athletic performance, but we'll again touch on that a little bit later. But electrolytes are important. They're important in medical scenarios too, and they're important in sports scenarios as well. So I think I've covered most of the basics of hydration. So we need a certain amount of water. Water is really important. 60% of our body is water, but it has to be at a certain osmolarity. That is 275 to 295 milliosmoles per liter. That's very important. And we want the intra and extracellular fluid to be at the same, because if they're not, then you're either going to get too much water in a cell or too little water in a cell, and then you're going to get dehydrated. And that's also not going to be great for muscle contractions and things like this. You can get cramps. Not good. So you want to be replenishing your electrolytes with the water that you're drinking if you're in a situation where you're losing a lot. So there's two ways in which you can actually lose fluid. The insensible ways, so stuff that you don't sense. While I'm sitting here and I'm talking, I'm breathing. I'm expelling air out of my lungs, and the air in my lungs contains a lot of moisture. So when I'm breathing, I'm losing moisture through my breath. That is not something I'm seeing on my skin or feeling the sweat. That's why it's insensible. Now, and for example, another insensible one is right now I'm sitting here, it's a little bit warm, so I might start sweating soon-ish, but currently I'm not sweating. But my skin is nicely moisturized. And part of that is because there's constantly a lot of water on your skin, and that's evaporating, and I'm not necessarily seeing that. But to keep my skin moisturized, there needs to be water there, and I'm losing some of that water. So that's another insensible way. So through those insensible ways of losing water, you can lose 1 liter a day. Again, a whole bottle like this, just from breathing and your skin slowly evaporating some water off it. That's quite a lot. So
that's with no exercise.
This is just you're sitting all day long not doing anything. You're losing that amount. So you want to at least drink this much water. And in that case, you probably don't need to replenish your electrolytes because you're not going to be expelling those electrolytes in your breath. Now, the second way is sensible losses. And one of the biggest ones is sweat, and the other one is urination. So in your urine, like I said earlier, you're losing 1.5 liters at rest, and you're losing about 100 milliliters at rest from just sweating, not exercise-induced sweating, just only 100 milliliters and 100 milliliters through your stool. So you're losing about 2.7 liters a day, which means you need to take in 2.7 liters a day. And again, that is quite a lot because that is almost 3 of these bottles. Let's round it up for simplicity's sake, and then 3 liters, that's quite a lot. So we're starting with 3 liters, and now you're adding an hour of exercise on top. Then we get another liter, so 4 of these bottles then. Or you're exercising in really hot conditions for an hour or 2, you could be losing another 4 liters. So you have to replenish that. But I think for the average person who's just sitting at home, losing just a normal amount of water and electrolytes, I think if you're just mostly drinking tap water and maybe taking in a few minerals like magnesium, which a lot of us are doing anyways, you're pretty good. And of course, if you're eating for a good example, let's say you're eating lion's mane mushroom fresh, that's a big part of your diet for some reason. Lion's mane is about 90% water. So if you're eating a kilo of lion's mane, you're getting about 900 milliliters of water. So that's almost a whole bottle like that. So through your food, you're also getting a lot of moisture, fluids, and of course electrolytes. So I think if you're a normal, regular old person who's not vigorously exercising, maybe an electrolyte is not super interesting for you, because with the losses that you're experiencing and the food that you're eating and the hopefully somewhat mineralized water you're drinking, you should be probably fine. Now, when you really kick up that fluid loss through exercise, now replenishment becomes a little bit more important. And you will really feel that too in recovery. Again, something I'll talk about in a sec. But that's the basic amount that you should be drinking, about, let's say, 3 liters a day. If you're exercising, you should drink probably 4 to 5, maybe 6 liters a day. And then I think because you're consuming way more water, you're also diluting more, so you should probably also be taking in some electrolytes. So I think look at how much water you have to consume, and based on that, I think you have a pretty good idea of when you need an electrolyte. And I think for most people who are physically active, an electrolyte is going to be a very nice addition to your day-to-day life. So with all of that out of the way, now let's actually get into the formulation. But I think that's important to kind of give an idea of how hydration works and to look at it in a more scientific way. Because in the Netherlands, we don't really talk about hydration all that much. So I think people aren't super educated about hydration here. And in the US, people are very educated about hydration, but because of marketing materials from like Gatorade. And I don't think that's doing a very good job of educating people on what hydration actually is and why an electrolyte is important and why maybe some of these big brand electrolytes aren't all that good. So let's get into why this stuff is good. And we put all of the electrolytes in here, which is already unique because not everyone is putting all of the electrolytes in. And if you look at most electrolyte drinks, they're putting in sodium, potassium, and that's usually it. You're lucky if you're getting a little sprinkle of magnesium in there, and of course you're getting chloride. Chloride is an electrolyte. So,
by the way, when we're talking about electrolytes, in this case, we're talking about the electrolytes from the periodic table, like the actual compounds that are considered electrolytes. So those are?
So sodium, potassium, chlorine, or in our case, chloride, but that is chlorine, bicarbonate, phosphate. Did I say calcium already?
You did, but is magnesium?
Magnesium is one, and that's it.
That's it. Okay.
So, again, sodium, potassium, calcium, magnesium, chloride, bicarbonate, and phosphorus. And most electrolytes get the sodium, the potassium, and the chloride, and not much else. We decided it's important to have all of them because you lose all of them, including calcium. Calcium is important for muscle contractions. If you're working out, you're probably losing some amount of calcium through those muscle contractions. We actually have seen the data on this. You do lose some calcium. So I think it's important to keep them all in balance. So we put them all in here. But on top of that, we also put in trace minerals because you're not just losing these electrolytes through your sweat. There's also a lot of other trace minerals like zinc, copper, chromium, manganese, boron, and iodine that you're also losing through your sweat. And those don't function as electrolytes in the body, but they have very important effects on, for example, antioxidant systems. So if you look at zinc, copper, and manganese, those are all important cofactors for an antioxidant enzyme called superoxide dismutase, which takes one of the stronger oxidative compounds, superoxide, and it turns it into hydrogen peroxide, which is also an oxidant, but it's slightly easier to deal with. So you have two of these enzymes, SOD1, which needs both copper and zinc, and you have SOD2, which needs manganese. Now, if we're exercising, we're causing oxidative stress. Our muscles, when they're contracting, produce superoxide, so we need to do something with this superoxide. And actually, the longer we exercise, the more SOD1, SOD2, and also the glutathione peroxidase enzymes we get. And that helps us adapt to exercise. So if you just start going to the gym, you're going to be super sore, you're going to have crazy DOMs. The longer you go, the more you adapt to it, the stronger you get. Those DOMs are going to get less because those antioxidant systems are also being upregulated. But you need manganese, copper, zinc, and then selenium for the GPX, the glutathione peroxidase enzymes. So in my mind, and this is a very unique thing we did in InfiniLyte, but in our mind, one, you are losing selenium, zinc, copper, manganese through your sweat. So I think we need to replace them anyways. But on the other hand, through exercise, we are increasing the amount of these antioxidant enzymes, which also means we probably have a slightly higher need for manganese, copper, and zinc because those enzymes need copper, zinc, and manganese to actually work, and selenium. So if you're losing it through your sweat and you're upregulating these antioxidant enzymes, you should be replacing it. And I think this is what makes InfiniLyte such a good recovery aid. Hyperhydration, just hydration in general after exercise, seems to help recovery, but I think giving some of these trace minerals that affect antioxidant systems is also important because, as we know, oxidation causes some muscle growth, it causes adaptation to exercise, but it also causes muscle soreness. So if we can attenuate some of that oxidation, we can enhance recovery, but we can maybe even enhance our overall endurance too, because when oxidation goes up, our endurance actually starts to go down, 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 and down. which, if you're in the gym, you're doing resistance exercise, you're trying to build muscle, you don't necessarily want to get in the way of this oxidation process, because oxidation causes damage, and that damage can translate into muscle gain to a certain degree. If you're running a marathon or something like that, that's not so important. You've done all the training beforehand. Now you're trying to keep that oxidation low, so reducing oxidation during your marathon is good. Now, when it comes to InfiniLyte, it's not going to have a direct antioxidant effect, but because manganese, copper, and zinc are important for those antioxidant enzymes, and those antioxidant enzymes get upregulated with exercise anyways, I think adding those in, especially considering that we're losing them through exercise, through sweat, helps with recovery. And I've tried a few different electrolyte products, and I don't think I've ever really noticed an enhancement of muscle recovery, but I'm noticing it in InfiniLyte, and I would have to say it's coming from there. And we've had a few customers on Reddit now report that they're also seeing major benefits with recovery. So I think that's really interesting. It makes it an interesting electrolyte supplement, especially for people who are performing high-level athletics. And I think that's where the whole WHO oral rehydration salt solution thing gets a little bit lost in translation, because again, that's designed to help people recover from almost dying from diarrhea. That is not the case for athletes. Athletes need a slightly different blend, and I think we have achieved that blend, and those trace minerals are important. So we also have iodine in there as a trace mineral. Iodine is important for thyroid function. Thyroid function is important for muscular growth, for endurance, for energy, for metabolism, all of those things. And you lose quite a bit of iodine through your sweat. So I think that's another really important one to replace, because iodine is low in our diets anyways. Interestingly enough, globally, I believe, you have it in the Netherlands, you have it in the US, they had a mandate to put iodine into table salt because we just weren't eating enough iodine anymore. And then we started telling people to eat less table salt, because eating too much table salt is bad for blood pressure to a certain degree. So now sodium consumption fell again, and because sodium consumption fell again, the main iodine source is starting to become low again. So it's a bit of a vicious cycle there. But basically, we're probably not getting enough iodine to begin with. You lose quite a bit through strenuous exercise, so that makes sense to replace, especially because it has an effect on our thyroid, and our thyroid has an important effect on adaptations and recovery from exercise. And also just making sure we gain lean muscle mass. Another one we have in there, a trace mineral, is chromium. Chromium helps with insulin sensitivity, and that can, of course, help with muscle building as well. Also has effects on bone health, on lean muscle mass, on fat gain. So it reduces fat gain, it seems to enhance lean muscle mass. Has effects on oxygen transport. So that's another important one that you lose through your sweat, and I think is important for overall recovery. And then copper. Copper is another really important one, because it is involved with the process of making ATP in the electron transport chain. So it's important for having enough ATP to actually power all of our muscles, all of these systems. It's another one that's lost through our sweat. And then we have boron too. Boron is another trace mineral that we have in here. Boron is important for muscular health. It's also important for how we process our food. It's important for testosterone, free testosterone. So another important one, I think, in the overall recovery picture. So I think that's really what sets InfiniLyte apart. It is both an electrolyte supplement and it is a trace mineral supplement, but it's really designed to help with athletic performance. And I realized I really needed to test out this athletic performance effect, and I had been out of the gym for quite a while, but when we really got close to beta testing InfiniLyte, I started going to the gym again, doing heavy compound lifts, deadlifts, squats, bench presses, and doing like a full body type workout every time I go into the gym. In the first week, I could barely walk. I'd gone to the gym in the past, and I knew all of the proper technique still, and I remembered how strong I used to be when I was in college, and I had 2 hours a day to exercise, and I was in the gym all the time. I was quite strong. So I was trying to basically ego lift, trying to match my 21-year-old self, and that didn't go too well. Super sore, but then the DOMs started to get kind of normal again. And then after about 2 weeks, when things normalized and my DOMs were kind of at the same level for a couple of days, a couple of workouts, I started adding in the InfiniLyte. So how I do it, I do 2 scoops in half a liter of water during my workout. So that's the fluid I drink throughout my workout. And then when I get home, I do another 2 scoops. So 2 scoops is a half serving, by the way. I do another 2 scoops in half a liter of water to replenish what I lost. So now I'm drinking half a liter during the workout, half a liter after the workout, and of course I'm drinking something before the workout as well. Usually I'm drinking a pre-workout in half a liter of water, so I'm preloading myself with some hydration there. Then during the workout I'm getting some electrolytes in, and after the workout I'm getting some electrolytes in. And when I started doing that, my lifts started going up, which of course they're going up anyways because I'm still in that first, well, now I'm in the second month, but I'm still in that honeymoon phase where every week I'm able to add a few kilos to my lifts. That's fantastic. But every time I'm adding this weight, I feel like I have a bit more endurance with the InfiniLyte in the mix, and I'm recovering better. And especially mentally, because of the weird schedule that I'm at. Sometimes I'm working out at like 4 p.m. and then coming home and eating something and then going into sometimes a 6-hour-long meeting with the US. So I have to be mentally completely there. And the first couple of times after these workouts, I was quite mentally tired. I did feel like a bit thirsty, a little bit dried out. I seemed to have a bit of a hard time rehydrating. That had a negative effect on my cognitive function and it made it a little bit hard to focus. Now that I'm drinking the InfiniLyte, I seem to be a bit more energized after my workouts, a bit more clear-headed, which makes sense because some of these minerals are involved in those kind of processes too. And of course, with the selenium there, the manganese, the copper, and the zinc, we can dial in that antioxidant system a little bit more, so that's probably having a positive effect there too. But I think that's a really important point to hammer home, is that we have a very complementary blend of trace minerals that make athletic performance better. And from what I've seen from our customers on Reddit, some of which seem to be quite intense athletes, either in the gym or endurance or cyclists or what it may be, they seem to be having good effects with it too. Some people are saying the sensation of hydration is intense. I'm having a hard time figuring out how that would feel, but strangely enough, I do feel like when I drink the InfiniLyte, it stays around in my system a little bit longer and I'm not peeing it out right away. When I'm drinking normal water, I seem to pee a little bit more, which also makes sense because sodium helps you retain a little bit of fluid, which is a nice trick if you're going on a road trip and you don't want to stop as many times for a bathroom break. Eat some jerky, eat some chips, whatever, get some more salted, maybe drink the InfiniLyte, and you will retain a little bit more water. But that's also a problem if you've eaten something really salty. You might actually get a bit water weighty. You will puff up a bit because you're holding on to more moisture. So that's another reason why sodium actually is important. And I have to say, once I started drinking the InfiniLyte during my workouts, usually during my workout I would pee one time. And ever since I started drinking the InfiniLyte, I haven't been peeing, even though I'm drinking the same amount of water. And strangely, when I was just drinking normal water, I was drinking almost a liter during my workout and not feeling as hydrated. It's kind of hard to really put a finger on that, than half a liter with the electrolytes. And when I was doing the full liter of water during my workouts, I felt really thirsty. I was pounding the water to try and get rid of that thirst. I knew that I was losing about a liter of water, so important to replace it. But it was making me feel kind of full and nauseous, and the InfiniLyte isn't doing that. And part of that maybe is also because water follows the electrolytes, and the electrolytes are getting absorbed through transporters. So the actual absorption of fluid is better in the context of InfiniLyte. And that seems to work really well. But really, this is optimized for athletic performance.
I'm not an extreme athlete, but if I can describe the sensation of hydration that people are talking about on Reddit, for me, it starts with my mouth feeling more hydrated, which is also something I mentioned in the new product video. My saliva stays more hydrated compared to what it normally would be just doing any given activity. And then another thing I notice when I take the electrolyte is that I instantly feel a sense of calm. And I have a feeling that this is coming from the magnesium, but it could also be coming from some of the other ingredients. I can't be sure of that. That might also just be a little bit of placebo. But I definitely get a sense of like relaxation and calm. And then one thing that I notice when I start to feel a little dehydrated is that I can get some tension in like my jaw and just a little bit of a headache kind of feeling. But when I drink the electrolyte, that really melts away, and I definitely have less tension in my jaw and in my neck overall.
Nice. So I'm assuming that's what a lot of people are feeling on Reddit too. It's just a bit of a generalized thing now.
Like, and if you're working at your whole body, you could probably feel it in other parts of your body as well. Definitely more so than we can with just sitting here and not moving around at all.
Yeah. But yeah, hearing things like, wow, this is extremely hydrating, like completely surpassing my expectations. Like, these are the kind of things we're hearing. So that's very positive. As you know, we spent a lot of time on making this electrolyte, but that's because we didn't just want to put out another electrolyte. We wanted something that we want to take. We're super nerds. We're getting super deep into all of this stuff. And that also means we have a serious itch that needs to be scratched with a serious, complex electrolyte. And that's what InfiniLyte ended up being. So keep telling us how it feels for you, because it's very rewarding for us to also see how well it is working. And of course, if it's not working well for you, tell us that too, so we can make it even better. But I think we have a pretty ideal electrolyte here, and it definitely is, for me, the best electrolyte that I've ever used, because it actually seems to work well. And while I'm not excited to get sick and have diarrhea again, I haven't had that in a long time, but the times that has happened to either myself or Erika, I usually go out to the store and I buy an electrolyte. Something that's based on the WHO RRS formulation, which you can buy in any pharmacy, and does make you feel better. And just from a safety standpoint, I think it's important. But now I'm curious to try out the InfiniLyte in a situation like that, because I feel like it will make me feel even better and maybe give me a bit of energy while I'm feeling quite low. Okay, so now let's actually just go down the ingredient list. Same thing we did in the new product video, but I'll just repeat it here. And actually, before we do that, let's drink some more.
Yeah.
And let's see. I'm just seeing if any of it has settled out. I do see a little bit on the bottom, so not everything is fully 100% water soluble, so that is a good thing to keep in mind. Shake your drink up a little bit every time.
Because the lid's off.
Well, don't shake it now because the lid's off. Swirl it. All right, so now once we drink this, we've each had a half serving. So not too much. We're just sitting here, we're not exercising, but it's a nice drink to have during the podcast. Especially because it's still warm in the Netherlands, even though we're in September already. It shouldn't be this warm, but it's quite warm today.
Yeah.
The more I drink it, it's actually starting to grow on me.
The flavor. Yeah, for me too.
It's weird. Like, it's not a particularly pleasant or unpleasant flavor, but there's just something about that mineral bite at the end. Because I did drink a little bit of... Earlier today, I was drinking the Electrolyte, and then at lunch, I just drank some normal water, and I was like, normal water is pretty boring
Yeah.
compared to this. Just that extra mineral is nice. So maybe one thing I'll also start doing is maybe even in a glass of water, just sprinkling a little bit in it. So not a full serving, but maybe in, like, if you have a liter of water that you're putting on the table that you're going to be drinking from, maybe just putting 1 scoop in. You're just getting a little bit of extra minerals, not full doses, but enough to maybe make that hydration feel a little bit better. This is maybe especially important if you're drinking like reverse osmosis water, or even like some of that Sparkletts water in the US. To me, it seems pretty low in minerals. The Dasani water, stuff like that, is super low in minerals. So I would also recommend, if you are drinking bottled mineral water, go for something with a higher mineral content. You can usually look on the back and see what the mineral amounts are. One of my favorite waters for this is Gerolsteiner, super high in minerals, or Vichy Catalan, also super high. Like, that genuinely tastes salty, like almost as salty as this Electrolyte.
San Pellegrino.
San Pellegrino.
It's also a good one.
Yeah. Also quite high in minerals. So if you're going to be drinking bottled water, maybe drink something that has higher mineral content. Or if you have some sort of water filtration system, make sure that you're properly remineralizing your water, because minerals are clearly very important. And if you're just drinking water, then you're diluting that overall electrolyte balance. Not good. Okay, let's get into the ingredients. So first on the list, we have calcium, and we're getting 75 milligrams of calcium. That's 6% of your daily value, and this is coming from calcium beta hydroxybutyrate. So that's that ketone, and that adds a little bit. A ketone can be utilized in a similar way to glucose, but it doesn't have the same properties as the glucose. It can be a bit energizing. Maybe that's adding a little bit to the endurance and recovery effects here. We definitely noticed a subtle difference, but a difference that was there when we added in the calcium beta hydroxybutyrate. So for us, it's a really interesting, nice little addition. I hope you appreciate it too. And then we have phosphorus. This is one of the electrolytes. Calcium is one of the actual electrolytes too. Phosphorus, 50 milligrams. This is 4% of our daily value, and it's coming from magnesium glycerophosphate. And that's also one of the main magnesium sources in here. Now we have iodine. That iodine is coming from potassium iodide, and you're getting 80 micrograms, or 53% of your daily value. That's a pretty solid dose of iodine, and this is based on the fact that we're not getting a ton through our diet, and we do seem to lose quite a bit through sweat. Then we have magnesium. This is coming from magnesium citrate and magnesium glycerophosphate, and that's 100 milligrams, so 25% of your daily value. This is a really high magnesium dose, and I don't think I've seen another electrolyte that has such a high magnesium dose. One of the reasons we put magnesium in there is because it has an effect on the sodium-potassium ATPase pump, and that seems to have an effect on muscle cramping too. So people who are taking magnesium tend to have less muscle cramping. People who are exercising really hard, losing a lot of fluid, they tend to cramp up a little bit. So it made sense to put some more magnesium in there. And actually our HR person, he is an avid softball player, and he's always talking about getting cramps when he plays softball and losing a lot of water and using electrolytes. And up until recently, the only thing that would help with the cramps was to just drink some pickle juice, which of course is super high in sodium, but also some of the other electrolytes. But now he's drinking InfiniLyte, and he's given it to a lot of his teammates. No cramping, more endurance, and they feel better after matches. So I thought that was really cool. He just posted that in one of our threads yesterday. So we're also internally, a lot of people are interested in this. So we're getting more and more reports, both from friends, family, staff, and people on Reddit. That's fantastic. Okay, so that's the magnesium. Helps with cramping. Now we have zinc. We're doing 5 milligrams of zinc. That's 45% of your daily value. Again, not going crazy high, but high enough because a lot of us aren't getting enough zinc anyways, and you're losing quite a bit of zinc through sweat, so that's a good one to have a little bit higher. And also because it's a bit more functional with the recovery aspect, because it has an effect on SOD1. Again, SOD1 is superoxide dismutase. It takes that very oxidative superoxide and turns it into the slightly more manageable hydrogen peroxide, which is then taken care of by other enzyme systems. But SOD1 doesn't work without zinc. You're losing zinc through exercise, and SOD1 gets upregulated in response to exercise because exercise produces superoxide. And one of the ways in which you adapt to exercise is by building up those antioxidant defenses. So zinc plays a very functional role in the recovery aspect, also the hormonal aspect of exercise, because zinc is important for hormone synthesis. Then we have selenium, and this is coming from selenium-enriched yeast. And how this works is you just take normal baker's yeast, brewer's yeast, and you feed it a broth which contains selenium. Now that yeast takes up the selenium and turns it into a bunch of very bioavailable selenium forms, one of those being selenocysteine. So this is the reason why we used yeast selenium. Yeast selenium really seems to be the best selenium there is. There doesn't seem to really be a better form. This is a little bit unfortunate for people with Crohn's disease, for example, who can't handle yeast as well. So we've had one complaint about this. We've looked at using a different selenium source, but this selenium is just so good, much safer than other selenium sources too. So we are going to stick with yeast for now. And that is giving you 55 micrograms of selenium, which is 100% of your daily value. We went a little bit higher here because it has a very functional role with recovery, and you can go up to 200 micrograms a day with selenium, and you're losing selenium through your sweat. So going for that higher dose here seemed appropriate because we really want it in there for the recovery benefits too. And then we have copper from sodium copper chlorophyllin. We're putting in 900 micrograms, and that's 100% of your daily value. One of the reasons why we went high is because zinc competes with copper uptake. So if you take a lot of zinc, you can actually deplete your copper levels. So one of the reasons why we're including copper here is to balance out the zinc. But another reason is because you lose it through your sweat, and it's important for ATP, and it's important for recovery, so it has a very functional benefit in here as well. And it's good for example, norepinephrine synthesis. So I think this is probably where I'm getting that slight mental clarity from after a workout, is a little bit of extra copper and zinc. And then we have, another thing, the form sodium copper chlorophyllin. It is a chlorophyll type molecule that has copper in it, and it's kind of like micro-encapsulated copper in that sense, and it's very bioavailable. Again, one of the better sources of copper to use, but that is where the green color is coming from. So if you're wondering about the green color, it's because of the sodium copper chlorophyllin. Then we have manganese, and this is coming from manganese citrate. It's delivering 2.3 milligrams. That's 100% of your daily value. This might be a little bit high, so on the next batch we're actually going to drop that in half. But one of the reasons why we did put manganese in at a higher dose was because of that functional benefit with recovery in mind, which it does seem to help really well with. So we will test it a little bit to see if it's similar before pushing it out into the world, but it should be very similar in terms of the recovery benefits with half of the manganese in there. So for those of you that got the first batch, there's no issue with taking this level of manganese, but if you're taking it for year after year after year, we determined maybe it's a little bit better to have half the amount of manganese in there. And InfiniLyte was so popular that in the first week, or the first 4 days, we sold about 400 units or so, and that completely depleted our InfiniLyte stock. So we're actually currently working on making the next batch, which will have half the manganese. And manganese important for that SOD2 enzyme, important for bone health, ligaments, all of that, very important in terms of athletics. Then we have chromium, from chromium picolinate, 35 micrograms, 100% of your daily value. Again, a little bit on the higher end, but it's because it has a very functional benefit. It has a benefit on insulin, and that can have an effect on how, especially after our workouts, we end up shuttling nutrients to our muscles, and that helps with recovery. So we think that has a big effect on recovery, and it has a big effect on lean muscle mass and glucose metabolism, which is really important in the context of exercise. And of course, you're losing it through your sweat too, and in a lot of clinical trials, they're going up to 200 micrograms, so that's like 4 times almost the dose here, or a bit more than 4 times the dose of chromium. So we feel like this is a safe dose and has a very functional benefit again. Then we have chloride, and that's coming from sodium chloride, just table salt, and that's 750 milligrams, or 33% of your daily value. This is a very important electrolyte too. And then we have sodium from sodium chloride. We're doing 500 milligrams, which is 22% of your daily value. A lot of other electrolytes are going a lot higher in sodium. There's a very famous one that has double the amount of sodium. In our opinion, there's one big issue with this. A lot of us are already eating too much sodium. We're way over the daily value that we should be consuming. And sodium can have negative effects on our cardiovascular system, so we don't want to go all too high. Another thing is, when you consume a lot of sodium, you excrete a lot of sodium. So in studies where they're looking at sodium excretions, they're usually not controlling for sodium intake. But in studies that do, the higher your sodium intake, the higher your sodium losses. This doesn't mean then that we're actually losing that much sodium. This sodium loss is artificially inflated by the high amount of sodium that we're intaking. So in our opinion, it's not fantastic probably to go that high with sodium, so we went for a bit more of a middle of the road option. So to balance out sodium, we want potassium. Potassium seems to reduce some of the negative cardiovascular effects of sodium, and actually there are arguments that we should be consuming more sodium, but of course if you consume, well, not that we should be consuming more sodium, but that the daily value of sodium should be a little bit higher. But we believe that if your sodium intake is high, then your potassium intake has to increase with it, and that seems to prevent some of the issues associated with sodium and enhances the effectiveness of sodium. Now, we don't lose as much potassium through our sweat as we do lose potassium, but we don't lose as much potassium as we do sodium through our sweat, but the losses are still considerable, especially over an hour, and especially in those cases where you're losing about 2 liters of sweat under hotter conditions. So because of that, we went with 400 milligrams of potassium, and that potassium is coming from potassium bicarbonate. And then that also gives bicarbonate, which is another electrolyte. So with sodium chloride, we're getting both sodium and chloride as electrolytes, and here we have another pair, that pair being potassium and bicarbonate, both being electrolytes. So 400 milligrams is only 9% of your daily value, and this is because the amount of potassium that you need on a daily basis is actually really high. Now, it is pretty easy to get potassium, so we don't have to go crazy high, just enough to balance things out and make sure that you're getting enough potassium to replenish what you're losing during exercise and to balance out sodium. And we're definitely not the highest in terms of potassium. There is one other electrolyte on the market which has about twice as much potassium. But compared to other electrolytes, we're definitely on the higher end of potassium, which I think is definitely having an effect on the endurance recovery effects too, because potassium has an influence on muscle cramping too. So And that's a big one that we wanted to have in there. And we played around a little bit with different levels, and we settled on this kind of being the ideal level, which I have a funny story to tell about that. So as I was doing a little bit of research on electrolytes and seeing what other people are saying about electrolytes on YouTube, just to also get a little bit of inspiration, there was a podcast that came up, and they were discussing this guy who was taking a horse electrolyte. And they obviously were saying that the guy was completely crazy. But I took a look at this horse electrolyte, and they used almost the same ratio of potassium to sodium that we did. And if we know anything about horses, they sweat quite a lot. They're very muscular. They run a lot. So this is obviously for horses who are running races and things like that, sport horses. They need a lot of electrolytes, and they probably need a somewhat similar balance that we do. So I thought it was really fascinating that, and I hadn't seen this electrolyte at all, but it contains sodium and potassium basically at the same ratio. So more sodium than potassium, but close together instead of super far apart. And they had manganese in it too. So this clearly well-designed horse electrolyte, it seems to be developed for increasing the athletic performance of these horses, and we inadvertently went a somewhat similar route. So I think we were reading some of the same research. Now, this person was saying that they were having amazing effects with the horse electrolyte at half a dose, but at half a dose they were getting still like 3,000 milligrams of sodium and something like 2,500 milligrams of potassium and way too high of doses of manganese. So it's not good. But I did one really funny thing. This was, I think, a bit of a trolling post, but one really funny thing that this person said is that their skin quality seemed to be better, than people were giving them compliments on their skin quality, which actually makes sense because they were taking a super high dose of manganese, so their superoxide dismutase levels were probably through the roof. But the only thing I will say to this person who's taken the horse electrolytes, you should probably stop, because you're going to give yourself neurotoxicity, because manganese at such high doses is not good for you. Remember, a horse is a very heavy animal, so it all equals out. But I thought that was fascinating that they also had manganese in there, and they had potassium and sodium at a similar ratio. So I think, that's what athletic performance looks like in terms of an electrolyte. And a horse is a really extreme example of that, and we're a much more mild example. And now, to this person, I would like to send you a bottle of InfiniLyte to see how that compares to your horse aid. Then, last but not least, we have boron. This is coming from boron glycinate. 1 milligram. There's no daily value for it because apparently boron isn't essential, even though a lot of people do think it is essential. It's essential for bone mineral density. It's important for free testosterone. It's important for recovery from exercise, and that's another reason why this went in there, and also because we lose boron through our sweat. So that's a pretty long ingredient list. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 different ingredients. So I think this is so far our most complex stack in terms of the amount of ingredients, but of course you need all of those different electrolytes. I think this is a really complete electrolyte. It tastes fine. You can flavor it easily yourself, by the way. We've been using some Belvoir Sicilian lemon syrup. It goes nicely with it. It brings out that saltiness a little bit more. It makes it quite a pleasant drink to drink. I luckily haven't had the opportunity to try it out in the context of a hangover yet. Luckily, I'm not drinking enough these days to ever really end up with a hangover. But
we are going to a sake tasting this weekend, so
yeah,
we'll let you know how it goes.
I think after the sake tasting, I'm gonna need some InfiniLyte. I will probably have a bit of a hangover after that one. But yeah, we don't necessarily drink enough to get into a serious hangover. I wish I could have tested this when I was in college, skiing, sweating, and drinking, because those were my worst hangovers of my life, which makes sense because we were at high altitude, it was very dry, it was very cold, and we were sweating a lot because we were skiing all day long and only really replenishing our lost body fluids with more liquor. So, in a situation like that, InfiniLyte would have probably been really nice. Generally, though, don't drink that much. I'm trying to think if we've missed anything. This has been a bit of a longer episode because there's been a lot to cover. I think it's a really fascinating topic. And the Institute of Human Anatomy, or the Human Anatomy Institute, I think it's actually the other way around, they have some really good videos on hydration where they're actually showing organs from cadavers and showing you on those organs, for example, this HPA axis, they actually show you on the brain. If you're squeamish, I would skip that video. If you have a very serious interest in hydration, electrolytes, and everything we just talked about, I think it's an important video to see.
I'll add those to the description so that you can check those videos out, because it's really fascinating and it makes it just that much more real to see physically where these mechanisms are actually happening.
Yeah. I would love to do a video with them one day and go over there and maybe show you different parts of the brain and how it works, because it does seem like a little bit of a magical thing sometimes when we talk about this, because you can't look inside of your brain, your organs, but having it laid out like that, like they have a cross-section of a kidney in one of the examples, and you can see where the nephrons are, where the filtration happens, and it's really interesting to see how the blood comes in and how the purified blood comes out through a different valve. Our bodies are extremely complex, extremely well suited at what they're doing, and we need to give them the right inputs, and I think InfiniLyte helps with that in case of exercise. And again, if you're not exercising, you can do what you want. I think it's probably a bit of a waste of time unless you have some sort of special use for it. I know one of my colleagues, he's part of a group that have some nervous system disorders, and they seem to really like electrolytes outside of the context of exercise. But again, I would urge you, take the electrolyte and then go work out, because whatever benefit the electrolyte is giving you, it's going to be even better if you also exercise, because our bodies crave exercise. And like Erika said, Joshua made a really good point about this. Everything just works a lot better when you exercise. And think about a lot of the supplements that we're taking, like berberine. A lot of the effects of berberine are based around the effects that exercise has on certain enzyme systems like AMPK. And berberine mimics the effects of exercise. So you can just go exercise. And then add berberine on top if you want to actually further increase those processes. But it's important to exercise. And if you're exercising, you really want to get the most out of it, having an electrolyte in your hydration strategy is important. And one last thing maybe to mention is drink before your workout, drink during your workout, drink after your workout. Don't do it all in one go, because that is also not super efficient. You want to preload, you want to drink while you're working out, and you want to drink afterwards to replenish. And if you do that with an electrolyte, you'll probably enhance your recovery and you'll enhance your sports performance.
So that's everything we have for you for this month's podcast, all about InfiniLyte. And it's been really fascinating to do some research into hydration and to electrolytes, because this is something that we're actively doing every single day, but I know that I've definitely not been hydrating myself as well as I could be, because I wasn't balancing out those electrolytes. So that's something that I can take with me going forwards. We would love to hear what your experience is taking InfiniLyte, but also just thoughts about this podcast and what you've learned about electrolytes and hydration. And you can reach out to us and tell us what you learned on Reddit. Our subreddit is r/Nootropics Depot. You can also reach out to us via the comments on YouTube or Spotify and the other streaming platforms. And if you want to get little heads ups and updates about the podcast on Instagram, you can also follow us on Instagram. Our handle is @InSearchOfInsight. Super easy to find. So as always, there's going to be descriptions, video links, the product link as well in the description of the YouTube video, so that you can go and do some more research into hydration and try InfiniLyte for yourself. Next month, we're coming to you with a very exciting podcast with a very special guest. So
Hopefully.
Hopefully. So if you're not already subscribed to our channels, definitely subscribe, follow, and if you like this podcast, give us a thumbs up. That always is fun to see that you are getting something positive out of these. So we'll see you
if
next
you
month.
did make it this far with Erika's little hint of the guest, I'll give you another hint. We're going to be resurrecting the terkestrone problem. So, if you're listening to this, and you're one of those people who are still selling fake terkestrone, you've got something coming for you soon. So, fix your shit.
This is our little Easter egg at the end of the podcast. With that somewhat cryptic but very serious message, we're going to say goodbye for now, and we'll see you next month on In Search of Insight. See ya.